Hello, everyone. I just want to remind everyone that we have our music prompt for today, and tweet Vine or tweet a SoundCloud link to the Ed Collab Gathering song. We finish this sentence. I want to tell the world that teaching. All right, this will help write the song at the end. Now, today we have Dr. Linder and Sarah Klein, and their presentation is going to be on better approaches to writing for tests. You can tweet us at hashtag the Ed Collab Gathering space hashtag number 8. Without further ado, let's get started.
Hi everybody, it's Rozlyn. I'm excited to present today. We have a pretty full presentation, so we're going to really jump right in. I'm Rozlyn, as I said, and I am a writer and a teacher for about 15 years. And I am presenting with Sarah Klein.
Hey everybody, I am a 7th grade ELA teacher, and I've been teaching for about 9 years, and I am really excited about sharing some great ideas with you all.
All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started and kind of walk you guys through what we hope will be some really cool strategies that we uncovered and kind of the process that we went through to figure out how to teach test writing skills to students in a meaningful way. And then we're going to end with a few samples from students and kind of walk you through that. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so our topic is better approaches to writing for tests, and we specifically are focusing on constructive responses that are helpful for students and that really can be fun. So I want you to think a minute about how you feel about high-stakes tests. If you're anything like me, when you hear that, I skipped something, I'll go back to that, you feel like this. I feel really crazy and I'm kind of worried, and these are some of the things that kind of go through my head. I think about those high-stakes tests and what they mean for our kids. I think about some of these larger issues, and it really kind of gets me in this kind of a tug-of-war. And I say tug-of-war because I think about, as teachers, we have to make a decision sometimes between teaching what we know is helpful and good for our students, and then still meeting our district, school, or local assessment goals. And in some cases, this is a matter of keeping your job or your annual assessment. So it's a really kind of tug-of-war that we don't want to be part of that's really quite damaging. Sarah, we've talked a lot about this, about the undue testing pressure that's associated with high-stakes tests, particularly writing tests.
Right, Roz, and I think that analogy of teaching as a tug-of-war, very accurate. I know when we first learned that this year the new test in Georgia was going to incorporate writing in all content areas, it was definitely, I looked very much like that picture you just had up, like, oh my gosh, and who's writing this? And, you know, it's a brand new way for our students to connect with the text. They were now having to you know, go to a constructive response, which was new for a lot of my students. They were used to coming from like the 5-paragraph essay sort of, you know, longer writing assignments, and now they were having to, you know, write with clarity and just really be succinct in what they were doing, and so we knew we, you know, had to prepare them for this.
And when I hear those things and we think about those things, what I do and trying to move past this tug-of-war, I kind of think about that analogy of making lemons, taking lemons and making lemonade. And so what we did was we said, okay, you know what, as teachers, we have to work under the mandates that exist. And to meet this goal, I decided to collaborate and really work on sharing some ideas with teachers to help the students get ready for this type of writing. So I kind of look at it like we're taking these lemons and we're going to make some writing lemonade. And it was helpful. So I kind of dug in, and it wasn't much fun, I have to say that. But I decided that if we're going to do this, the first thing I have to do is know what the lemons are. So I started researching and digging into some of the larger writing assessments like PARC and Smarter Balance and a lot of the state created tests to figure out, okay, what are kids required to do? When I examine them, what are the writing tasks? What do they actually want them to do? And as I went through those, I found out that everybody had like their own alphabet soup of names for these writing tasks. Some of the things that I saw are listed on your screen right there. And I had to kind of sort through these. And initially it was really, really stressful. It seemed like, oh my gosh, what is happening? How am I going to help the teachers I work with? Because I work with teachers in so many states. But I actually found there were some commonalities. There were some traits that were pretty common across these different tasks. So I spent about a month just deconstructing those and pulling out, okay, what are students supposed to do? And what you see on your screen, those were some of the commonalities and things that I found kids had to do. And even though I was really upset about these lemons, I wasn't happy about it, I came to the realization that, hey, kids should be able to do this. Like, these things aren't horrible. You know, when I pulled it away from the test and I really started to think differently and look at the parts, these are good things. These are things I actually want my kids to do. So for me, it was very eye-opening. And I was like, okay, I need to shift my thinking a little bit. So one of the first things I did when I thought about these things, I put them front and center. And that's why I have them there like that. I thought about them. And the first thing that struck me, I said, these are hard. Kids don't do this. How are we going to get them to do this? Then I kind of had an epiphany, and I realized that, you know what? Kids actually do this. They just don't do it at school. So kind of stay with me here. This is a little wacky, but I have two daughters, which get to be my guinea pigs all the time. And at the time when I was thinking about this, I had a student in pre-K, and I had an older student who was in elementary school, and she does school really well. Like, she's been conditioned to get in there and do what you're supposed to do. My youngest one, not so much. She's a little wild one. And I came to them and I said, you know, guys, you've got to be able to explain what you think, and you've got to be able to elaborate and provide evidence to support what you're saying. So I'm telling them this, and I'm seeing what they're going to do. The little one came to me, and every day she had a new idea and evidence to back it up. And I was just like, wow, this is amazing. My oldest, not so much. She wanted to know, well, how much evidence do we need? And mind you, they're just speaking. They're not even writing anything. How long does it have to be? Do we have to do it every day? I was going nuts. And it kind of led me to that epiphany that, you know what, in school, we really don't ask kids to express themselves and support their ideas and their thinking. If a kid raises their hand and they go, oh, I think the answer is B, and you go, great, tell me about that. Why do you think that? What do? They instantly change their mind. Wait, it must be C. Because in school, we really don't teach them that they should explain and elaborate. Sarah, did you have experiences with that too?
Oh, absolutely. I love the example that you gave of when a student gives an answer and we ask them to explain why they got that. They really do. That's one of the first things they start to backpedal, and they think that they're wrong because they're just so conditioned to just giving an answer and that's it. And now we're asking them to explain. And when you talked about that kids do this all the time, when they're talking, they do. And that was one of the things when, you know, we started the constructed response instruction back in August that I kind of brought to the table with them. You know, I was like, listen, you guys do this all the time when you're talking with one another, when you're trying to convince your parents to let you do something, or your teacher, you know, why you should be allowed to turn something in late or whatever. Like, you're able to give me that evidence and that support. Now you're just having to do it in the writing, which was new for them because, again, for so long they've sort of been told how to write. It was like a formula. And, you know, now they're having to kind of branch out on their own, and they just needed that confidence, which is, you know, what we're getting at.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that I did when we were considering these different things, I started to think about how can we teach kids in meaningful ways using what we know actually works. And so I had to kind of reflect on some of the best practices that we know about. So one of the things I did was I started thinking about when I taught younger students. And let me make sure you guys see this up here. Some of the practices that I thought about were based on the things that I did in Writer's Workshop and the things that I did with my elementary students. And one of the things that I used to do a lot is I built my class around mentor text. There was a lot of modeling. We did think alouds. I wrote with the students. They were immersed in literature. And something happens when they get to upper elementary and middle school and the focus shifts away from fiction. A lot of these things that we know make sense, that we know are best practices, tend to go away. So one of the things I wanted to do when I thought about these constructive responses was think about those best practices and say, how can I use those to teach these kids how to do this? Because I know those things are valid, those things are good. What can I do? And so I kind of got centered around the idea of mentor text. And I kind of stayed there for a while because if you think about mentor text for a while, what mentor text do we have for constructive responses? If I'm going to teach kids to write about narratives, I can totally go grab a great novel from my library in my class and show them, hey, guys, let's look at how people describe. Look at how they use dialogue. But what was I supposed to use for constructive responses? So at first I was really frustrated because we're not asking them to do an essay or anything like that. A constructive response is short. You know, it's basically a paragraph, a big paragraph. That's what they're doing. So they had no models. I had nothing to show them. So that kind of frustrated me. But I thought a little bit about this, and I said, okay, there have to be models that exist. We can't teach kids without mentor text, without real examples, because that's what we know is good. And I started to think about where the real mentors for this kind of writing was. Because even though it's test writing, we know that there's value. We looked at those skills. We know the things that they need to know. How can I get a mentor for them? And so that kind of became the center of what I was thinking about. Do you guys see my screen there when I have that question? Has it shown up? Okay, well, when I thought about real-world mentors, I thought about where do we explain? Where do we argue? Where do you see this type of thing? And typically, I see it when I am watching the news, when I read a magazine article, when I'm looking at something in the newspaper, I'm looking at an op-ed. Those are the times when I see those things. So I started really going and trying to collect like a little file. Like, okay, what are they doing? How do they explain things? How do they provide evidence? How are they doing these things? And those really became my mentors for kids. So what I did initially was gather as many sources as possible. And I took these different things and I brought them to my kids. And I said, hey guys, let's take a look at this article. Look how they used evidence. Look how they explained their evidence. And we started gathering moves. That's what I called them. I said, look at what people are doing. And you guys, if you know anything about me, I love anchor charts. Charts, this is one of my books. I'm all about making a chart out of everything. I think that visual learning is key. So one of the things I did with the students I worked with, we started making anchor charts. And the anchor charts were kind of like our collection of all the things we noticed. It's a big, you know, it's the cool word now to say textual evidence. But when you're really talking about that, what is textual evidence? What does it look like when someone cites some type of evidence? We started collecting those moves, and we realized there were patterns, there were things that showed up. So we started making these things from the newspaper, from the internet, from online magazines. We started making those our real life mentor texts. So I'm going to show you guys a picture of some of the charts that we created, and you can kind of get a sense of how specific we were and the kind of things that we found. So let me get that up for you guys, and let's take a look. All right, so let's see. Do you guys see that there? It doesn't look like it's showing up there. Gotta love technology, right? When you want to show a picture of something, that's when it gets a little sketchy. Let's see if I can get one up. All right, so basically what we did was we started to make charts, and this is a picture of two charts right there. And we talked about, we started with the basics because it really was how do you share evidence. And a lot of teachers I work with, they kept trying to have kids like do some kind of citation like they were using an APA or MLA manual. And I'm like, these are fifth graders, these are sixth graders. That's not what you do. And we started putting on the Post-it notes what kind of things they were doing. And we started learning from those news articles. We started learning a lot from news clips when they have the breaking news. And so each of the Post-it notes you see here were some of the things that they did. They would say, you know, according to or based on or this describes. Those are all the things they would do. And we noticed patterns. No one got up and said, according to the news, this is what happened, and then moved on. They elaborated. They explained why this mattered. You know, we used to joke about the why does this matter side, and we used to call it the who cares side. Like, who cares? Why are you telling us this? And we saw that that's what those mentors did. And we just kept collecting examples. So that's what that represents there. Our goal at this point was just to see what do these real authors do when they have to do their versions of a constructed response. Mm-hmm. Then we kept building our bank. We noticed, hey, they acknowledged counterclaims. And it was cool because we naturally saw that. And those Post-it notes, we kept putting them up there, the things that they would use. And it got so specific. Like you see the yellow one says on one hand. Why would they know to say that? They wouldn't know that. But we saw, hey, this is something real that authors actually do. And we got really specific with these, but we had some that were general. That's what this next one is. We talked about arguments and op-eds. What were some things that they used? And we saw they dealt with a lot of different things. So our goal was really to build this huge bank of moves. What do real writers do when they have to do this? So it was really powerful. It was really fun, I got to tell you, because we went through these, we pulled them, and after we found these different things, we started to use them. And I have to say, we didn't use them in a way where it was like, great, let me prove that I have a rigorous classroom and give you this big giant piece of text, and I'd like you to prove something about it or explain it to me. We didn't do any of that with them. We started pulling things that were cool and fun that they liked. We talked about subjects they cared about. I mean, we really brought it down to their level and let them explore and try these skills out. Since we had this great collection, we wanted them to really try it out. And when I say things that were fun, don't take that as a proxy for low level. I think we act as though there are two things that are distinctly different. Either it's rigorous and boring, or it's fun and easy. But it's not. One of the cool things we did, we grabbed Entertainment Weekly. I mean, it's a regular magazine. I was working with fifth graders with that. And we started pulling out reviews and people talking about movies, and the kids loved it because they were talking about something that they cared about. So that was really powerful, and it really, really helped us to have the kids get a chance to practice these different moves, think about what they wanted to do. They got to really use it in an authentic way for them. They weren't telling me about, Shakespeare or something crazy like that that was way beyond their level. They were talking about what mattered to them. So they got this skill practice in a way that they could connect to it. It wasn't this drill and kill. I don't think we even mentioned the word constructed response. It was just like, hey, how do people explain? How do people support their ideas? Let's talk about that. And it got where it was a really fun thing. And so Sarah's going to talk to you a little bit about taking these moves from that level, where we did the fun things that they liked, and we started maybe scaffolding it a little bit less, that gradual release, and we kind of increased the rigor of what they were dealing with. So I'm going to throw it over to you, Sarah, because I know you have some really good examples about how this worked with you.
Yeah, so I do, and I want to kind of, before I start to show the student work and what my students did and how they made it, really took ownership of their writing and their learning experiences. I'm in complete agreement with what Roz was talking about as far as when you're first starting this, or even in the middle of it, because sometimes, when you are always giving them a passage to read that they might see on a test or that somebody else has written, from a textbook or something, it's, it can be a little bit overwhelming. So I started with, if you guys know Scope magazine, like they have great articles that are written for middle school students, and they're fun. I found out who their, the music groups that they like now and that sort of thing, the professional athletes, found articles on them, just things that would really interest the students. And before they knew it, they're writing responses on, I would create the questions, but they're writing responses on things that interest them. And, a couple times, the kids would even say that, oh, this was fun. And, for an English teacher, that really warmed my heart to hear, kids say that writing was fun, because that's oftentimes it's not, because it's been such a labored, task for them. So when we started this and we used those anchor charts that that Roz just showed you all, and looked at what real authors do, I kind of used the analogy of a recipe. And I asked all my students, I said, how many of you have ever cooked anything? And all of them had raised their hand, and we talked about what they had cooked and if they were good at it and that sort of thing. So I talked about me, and I said that I have a really good chili recipe and that I make good chili, and people ask me to make it all the time. And when I first started making that chili, I had to look at the recipe all the time. Like, I didn't remember, what was on there, how much of this, how much of that. But the more I made it, the less I needed to rely on that recipe. And I could add some things if I wanted, or take things out and just, kind of just make it my own. But in the end, it's still chili, right? And so that's how I kind of use that analogy with this writing. Like in the beginning, they're using the ideas from the anchor charts. That's kind of their recipe, and they're using what they're comfortable with. And then the more that they did, the less they needed to rely on that anchor chart, and they could add things that was more, like in line with their voice and that sort of thing. But in the end, you still had a constructed response because, you know, again, it was brand new writing for them. And I don't know about you all, but I know for me as a middle school teacher, whenever you bring up a writing assignment, one of the very first questions is, how many sentences or how many paragraphs, you know, or how many, you know, how long, how many words in a sentence, that kind of thing. And I'll be honest, I'm a teacher who tells them, you know, I don't give limits, you know, until you say what you need to say and say it well. But the good thing about a constructed response is that it is, like Roz said before, it's a paragraph. It's a longer paragraph than what most students, you know, want to write, but it's a paragraph. They have to be, you know, very succinct. They're writing with clarity. But what's good about it is that all students can be successful with this. So you can have your struggling writers, you know, up to your, you know, awesome writers who, you know, are going to go on and, you know, have aspirations to be authors and that sort of thing. They all can do this. And if they're using that, you know, recipe from the anchor charts and what real authors do, then it really sets them up for success, which is what we want, and builds that confidence. So I am going to put up some examples of some student work. So we did this probably, I think, about 2 months ago, and everybody read an article, and they had to, and then there was a constructed response. There was also a quiz, so you'll see somebody mentions that just for comprehension. But and then what I had them do, I gave back the constructed response, and I gave them highlighters, and I wanted them to highlight the different you know, components of a constructed response, what they, you know, thought made it up. And so let me put one up here.
Hey, Sarah, while you're doing that, I wanted to just jump in there. You said what you're showing is from like 2 months ago.
Yeah, about like probably 6-7 weeks ago.
I want to point this out. Sarah, I want you to see how this process is of not drilling them for test prep. From the beginning of the year in August, Sarah was teaching them these skills, and they didn't really even realize that's what they were doing. They'd already had a lot of that experience. So this is now she's ready to, you know, label it test prep and give them time to practice it. So I think that's important to look at. This is not the starting point.
Right, yeah, thanks. Exactly. It's not. I mean, when you know, see what I probably should have pulled something from what they did in August to now, but I didn't. So anyway, if you look at this, you'll see, does everybody see it?
Yep.
Okay. So if you'll notice, so this is her constructed response, and, you know, she really just kind of, you know, took ownership of it. I hate to keep saying that, but that's really what she's doing. Like, she drew this chart down here. She used her, you know, the different colors to kind of differentiate what it is she did. She wrote herself a little note that she had too much, you know, extra information, which I think is great that she was able to make that, you know, that observation that, hey, you know, I'm writing about something that's really not relevant to the question, because, you know, that was one thing we did try to keep them to stay on topic. So yeah, so she's got this little chart, and let's look at some others. Okay, so this one right here, again, she's using, you know, she's borrowing, you know, from the anchor text and what the real authors use, right? Like, she's looking at, okay, this is where I restated what the question was, here's my evidence. And for a lot of my students, like, what was really challenging for them was providing support for that evidence. Like, they had to put in their own words, why does this matter? Why is this? And even though we looked at so many samples, like, it was great to see the progress over the year, because a lot of times at the beginning, that support would just look like, this is, you know, this goes to show that, you know, kids don't want to eat with other people in the cafeteria other than their friends, or whatever the article might have been about. And it doesn't really, you know, like, give like true support. So they were great in coming up with that. This is.
Hey, Sarah, can you go back to that one again?
Yeah.
I want to point this out. I'm not even looking at what the kid wrote, but I'm looking at your commentary and their commentary on the side. What I really like here is that this student was able to name what they were doing. Like, this is how I supported it. And I think that's you asking, is this a pro-con? Like, are you doing the pros and cons? I think that's what's powerful, that they're choosing what to put in there, but they are being intentional, which is powerful. That's amazing to see that.
Yeah, it is. You're right. Yeah, she totally named what it was that she was doing. And it was great. It was, you know, again, it gave me affirmation as a teacher, to know that, okay, look at what we've done, over the course of a year is good. And of course, this wasn't the only writing we did. But so here's another one. Again, he didn't really name it on there, but I forgot to add, one of the other part of the assignment was after they did this, they had to go back and rewrite it and, make it, any kind of revisions if they needed. And then they had to add a reflection that told me what it was that they did differently, what they changed, why they changed it. Again, just really kind of owning it, naming what they did, just really, truly taking ownership of their learning, which is what we want.
Being intentional. I think that's
very, very intentional, right? Yeah, and aside from, and of course throughout the year, I gave a lot of feedback, but I thought it was important for them to give themselves feedback and just kind of, look at it, because sometimes they look at what the teacher writes and they're like, okay, and don't really do anything with it. But this, making them do it was really, really a good thing. Again, and what I liked about this one, so you can kind of see, she took, these are her different colors to, sort of indicate what it is that she did and, how intentional she was. But she also has a little pattern here that helped her with organization.
Oh, I love that. I love that she's found what works for her. Yeah, I see that. You see her repeating it. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was great. And so, we took our standardized test this past week for language arts, and that was on Monday and Tuesday. And I can tell you that, as I walked around, it was really refreshing just to see, like, they were so confident. They did not, and even talking to them afterwards, like, how did you feel about it? I didn't really have any student tell me, even those that struggled all year or hardly wrote anything, like, throughout the year, they were, I should probably stop screen sharing. They were like, oh my gosh, I did such a great job, and, like, you could see that they did pre-writing, and they, just all that. They really felt confident, and that was the biggest thing. This was a brand new test, and I'm not a teacher who talks about the test all year, because I don't. There's so many other important things to talk about in the classroom, but at the same time, the test is what, it determines a lot of things about these students, and so you do want them to feel comfortable, you want them to feel confident that they know what they're doing, and I felt like they did a great job and really felt it.
Sarah, I have to put you on the spot here. Probably should have mentioned this earlier, but I just thought about something. And we talk about kids internalizing skills, and I hope you're not embarrassed to share this, but I was thinking about, you showed me a picture of the kid who wrote you a note in a constructive response format, and I'm bringing that up because they got it. They understood, hey, how do I do this? How do I explain myself? How do I support my ideas? To the point that Sarah got all kind of notes trying to convince her of things or professing their love for her.
I know.
Like, here's a constructive response on this. So we thought that was really cool that they internalized that. You want to talk about that or not?
Sure. Oh, no, I will. That was great. Yeah, I'll have to tell the student that he was mentioned. I won't name him, of course, but it was great. So this, we as teachers, right, everybody, you have some kid that's going to have a crush on you at some point in your career, and he does. And but he wrote me, it was right before Christmas break, I think, and we were going to be gone for a couple of weeks, and he wrote me a note about how much he was going to miss me and why I was his favorite teacher and why he loved me. But it was in the constructed response format that we had been working on, and it was just the most precious. I have it hanging on the board. It was so sweet, but of course I had to share it with Roz because that's her thing. But yeah, it was great. But and then a couple of other students wanted to copy, not copy, but follow suit, and so they were writing me notes about why I should bump up their grade or whatever, but it was all in that format, and I was like, this is awesome.
I think that's really cool because think about what they're doing. They have something that's authentic to them, whether it's love or more free time, but based on those mentor moves and examples, they learned,
Yeah.
hey, I know how you can convince someone, or I know
Right.
how you can explain this to someone. So we just felt that was cool, and that was Christmas time. We
Yeah,
still
that
aren't
was
even close
Christmas.
to the
Yeah.
test. They just are
Right.
learning that I can do this. These are skills that I can do, and I've
Yeah.
seen what real writers do when they are trying to do what I'm trying to do. So
Yeah.
that's really cool. Really
Yeah,
cool.
it was. It was great. It was great.
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about our process just because we don't have much time. I'm going to put up a slide about approaching test writing and just talk a little bit about that. Make sure it's showing up here. Okay,
Yeah, you're
so
good.
pretty much let's talk about these bullets a little bit here. These are important, and we only have a limited amount of time, so we can't go in great detail, but I want to just still put them here. One of the things that we kind of glossed over is that we didn't just introduce the moves. We wrote using those moves. We were like, wow, look how they did this. There was so much chart paper and writing, and I mean, we really were like, look how I did this. Isn't this cool? And we gave the kids multiple examples. And the second bullet was really important. When they realized, oh, this is what newscasters do, like it became a real thing. It wasn't just, oh, this is just what I think is cool, but they got to see those things, and they became detectives too. They were kind of looking like, oh, look at this, I noticed this, and it was really cool. The third bullet is really exciting for me, I think just because I like making up wacky names, but we named everything that we saw. If an author did something or a writer did something, we were like, oh, look how he did that, and we would give it a name. The kids loved that because they could wrap their brains around that, and they could say, you know, I'm going to use that in my writing when I do mine. So it was really cool that they could name those things. And then the fourth bullet, which I hope will grow this more, show kids lots of possibilities. You can't tell them, hey, you should elaborate by explaining or giving an example. That means nothing to a student. They need to have this bank of ideas of real things that people actually do. And then the last thing, which we already talked about a little bit, let students practice the skills with things that matter. I can't tell you how many times I've worked in a class and I had to write about a singer or a rapper. That's fine. Whatever matters to them. We want them to practice it and use it with things that they care about. And then finally, after all this, now we can go to the thing that people put front and center usually. Let's apply the skills to these test prep things. And that's a limited small thing. So you're not teaching to the test and drilling and killing your kids all year, but those are the basic tenets that we really try to adhere to. And so we're excited as we look forward to next year, ways to not only tweak it, but to really grow our bank of moves. Like, what else can we find? Like, I'm excited about what that is and how many other directions we can go in. But the whole gist of this is really just making sure that kids have a focus on the skills that they need and that they have examples of what to do with that, and that they see you interact and use those same moves. We did a lot of thinking out loud and wondering, does this make sense? Is this where I want to do this? And it really made the kids comfortable and kind of set them up for success. So really excited about that. Sarah, anything else you're thinking?
No, I mean, I would, say that all of those things are really important. Modeling, of course, I think, probably as teachers, we know this. They have to see it, even if it is something that you've done before or they've done in a previous grade. They still need, we all need refreshers too as adults. And so they need to see that. And I think it's great, like, if you even, if you make a mistake, and because I did that on one of the things I was trying to show my textual evidence, and they were like, Miss Klein, that's not, and I said, oh my gosh, you're right, kind of own it and say, look, here I went off, topic as well, and just let them know that that's okay, because they need to see that from their teachers, and
and the
possibilities.
Yes.
So giving them those opportunities to write about things that they enjoy is really key. But I will say, that test prep at the end is, it's a little bit important also to give them something that they don't enjoy either, because they need to know that it's not always going to be about their favorite athlete. Sometimes those tests are it's not the most interesting reading. So they need to be prepared for that too. So
I think what the takeaway for that is, because I'm big on that, like using media, using fun things. I think I kind of visualize a stair step. Like we've got to give them those fun things to learn what they're doing, and then we can give them more challenging things. But I think a lot of times people jump right to the rigor, like, oh, here's the hardest thing ever, but you're skipping the actual instruction and time to practice. And if you take the time to build those steps, then when you get to that top one, it's so it's so much easier. It really is. And to me, I'm really big about working smarter, not harder. Whereas before this, I used to dread tests. Like, test time is coming, great, I have to stop teaching. Whereas it wasn't like that. We were to apply our things that we learned and our skills to the test. And to me, that's how it should be. It shouldn't be school stops, real learning stops, because we got to go ahead and do this thing here that no one cares about. So it made it, I think that's why your kids felt better too. Remember you mentioned you were confident, and they were like, yeah, I got this. This is simple. I can do this. So really had a good experience with that.
It was great.
We tried to stop so we had enough time if anyone had questions or anything like that. So we have about 9 minutes left, and this will be a good time if we have any sort of questions. Would this be a good time for that? Speaking to our hosts here, or are we good?
Yeah, no, there was a question, and it was for Sarah.
All right.
All right.
And the question was about building the literacy piece throughout the whole year. You start in August, in the beginning of the year, and they wanted to kind of know, like, how do you build, like, how do you scaffold?
That's okay. That's a great question. So yeah, I started. Kind of probably towards the end of this. We began in Georgia the beginning of August. So probably once you get a little bit comfortable with the students, mid-August I started, and mainly doing that modeling, kind of having like fun PowerPoint, reading things for them to see, or even like what am I trying to say? Clips from
like
videos
clips.
And stuff. Yeah, video clips that they could kind of relate to. And then the way that we went about, so then they would kind of practice. I would give feedback, and honestly, I think the biggest way that I scaffolded was giving it to them. That what I showed you on those student samples, that wasn't the first time that I had asked them to highlight and look at what is it, what do you have in here that works. So that was just the most, probably the most recent one. But yeah, having them kind of just look at their own piece. One time I switched it up where they got somebody else's, and they had to like peer edit, and that was good because sometimes they don't like what their classmates pick out. They're like but then they realize, okay, well, I guess my classmate was right because I didn't have this or something, or this doesn't make sense, or didn't go with it, or whatever. So yeah, I would say that was the way that I scaffolded. If that's I hope that helps you, but just kind of giving it back to them, not always me being the one that graded it. And then I would grade it after they would revise or something like that, or after they did that. But not everything was a grade either. I mean, sometimes it was just practice.
Just feedback.
Yeah, it was just feedback. And we did it, pretty regularly. So about once a week at the beginning, and then, tapered off a little bit. So usually on Fridays, they knew Friday was constructed response day. So I hope that helped.
And we have one more question. How do you stay positive when stress builds?
Is that to me or to Roz?
I think it's just in general. We talk about that a lot. Let me say that. We spend a lot of time talking about that, being positive under stress. Sarah, I got to say, this is your area entirely in terms of your research. Sarah didn't say much about it. She's very humble, but she's a doctoral student, and she's actually doing her dissertation work on just teaching morale and how hard it is to stay positive with the stress of things like this. And I have to tell you, going into this process, that was my hope. Like, how can I make this not another stressor? So I don't think we have the answer. I think we understand how it feels, but it definitely is something that I think all teachers struggle with.
Completely agree with that. I think you just have to, and I'm not sure if what was the question again, just how do you stay positive?
As stress builds.
And when stress builds. Yeah, I mean, just making it fun with the kids, and sometimes, honestly, just talking about something that has nothing to do with the test or school. Like just kind of, getting the kids to just share their own thoughts, and then they kind of, and for a few minutes, not the whole class period, obviously, and then and then going back to what you had planned for that day. But I'm a big believer in building my kids up and just always saying, having a positive word. And even on some of those assignments where there really wasn't, anything much to be highlighted, still trying to find something,
something
positive
good there,
so that they weren't giving up. Yeah. So hope that helped.
And I'm a teacher as well, and what about the teachers that think, like, from the beginning of school until the test, they feel that the test they should be preparing them for the test, and it should be test prep all year, day one.
Well,
what advice, or what would you say to them?
Well, you are preparing them from day one. You really are, but it's just the way you go about it and expose them to it. Like if you're constantly saying, oh, we're doing the test prep today, or like we're going to get on this website to get you ready for the test, that kind of, like, to me, I think they're so kind of done with it when it becomes the end of the year and they have to take that test. Whereas but that's the goal. You're addressing those standards and you're preparing them all year long. You're just not, you're doing it in a way where they don't even realize it's test prep. I don't know.
I want to jump in here. One of the things, because I work with a lot of schools, and I see those teachers a lot. One of the things, and it takes all year for it to happen, but I like when the test is over, when we have results back, to say to that teacher, you remember the nightmare year that you had with all the drill and kill? For these results here, look at my results from teaching. And I know that sounds like really crazy, but if we are actually teaching those skills, it's no reason to drill and kill them. Right. I think that those teachers believe that is the only way to do it because they just don't have another way. When I go in and do workshops on this, I always have a teacher who's like, nope, not doing that. We're going to do it this way because we're going to do a worksheet and then another worksheet. But I think when they see, hey, look, kids get this. When, a kid is writing a constructive response to declare their love for their teacher, they get it. That kid with that worksheet, they have no idea what's going on. Right. They're just doing it because you told them to do it. They're not taking anything away. So with those teachers, I kind of got to prove to them that, hey, what you're thinking about, what you believe, just maybe it's time for a paradigm shift.
Right. Good point.
And that's fantastic. I just wanted to show some tweets that went out.
Okay.
One was great ideas for preparing students for writing for tests. I thought that was great.
Thank you, A. Reagan.
Great ideas. Another one, yet again, great ideas for writing. Gather mentor texts, look at what others do. Anchor charts for visual learners. So, I think that you really struck a chord with the audience. And then my tweet, because I really enjoyed this, was don't mistake fun for easy and hard and boring for rigorous. I thought that was a great comment. And is there anything that, like, last comments that you would like to say to the audience?
Oh, you're muted.
I don't have any last comments, but I think that people, I guess I do now. I think that teachers need to look at really analyzing skills that we're teaching kids. That's what this process taught me. Like, don't focus on those lemons. Know what those lemons are, but really look at what skills are associated with that. I think then we can kind of disconnect from test prep and just focus on making sure we include those skills into our instruction. So that's kind of my takeaway for that.
Yeah, I agree. Just, have fun with your students, make writing fun and everything else that you're doing in your classroom. And, happy writing.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Now, we do have another session. There's two different sessions that you can attend, so we hope that you attend those two other sessions. Thank you very much, Roz. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you, guys.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.